I have told myself this story so many times that I almost believe the version where I am the reasonable one. I planned the trip because I needed to breathe. I moved the money because I needed to go. I had a plan to put it back before anyone noticed, and I told myself that plan was enough. What I did not plan for was my daughter pulling a college worksheet out of her backpack at our kitchen table while my husband sat across from me with a printed bank statement already in his hand and our daughter's name on the account number at the top. My name is Renata Caldwell, and I am 38 years old, and I am very good at making things look fine. I work part-time as an administrative coordinator at a dental practice, which means I schedule appointments and manage patient records and smile at people who are already nervous, and I am genuinely good at it, even if it is not the career I was building when I was 26 and the baby arrived and Daniel and I decided together, or I agreed and he scheduled, that I would be the one to stay. On the surface, the life looks correct. There is a house in a good school district, a daughter who makes honor roll, a husband who has never once missed a bill payment. What sits underneath the surface is harder to name, and I have spent 2 years not naming it. On an ordinary Tuesday evening in October, I drove home from the grocery store and sat in the parking lot for 17 minutes after loading the bags. Through the windshield, a city bus moved past with a beach advertisement on its side. Blue water, white walls, the kind of image that is meant to mean nothing and means everything specific to someone who has not left this city in 3 years. I watched the bus turn the corner, and I was not thinking about the beach. I was thinking about the fact of watching the bus. I sat until a man with a cart knocked gently on my passenger window to ask if I was leaving the spot, and then I started the car and went home. The house that evening had the quality all our evenings had. 3 people in proximity, each inside a separate task. Daniel's laptop hummed at the kitchen table. Sophia's pencil moved across chemistry homework. The television was on with the sound off. I put the groceries away alone and stopped in the doorway of Daniel's home office, not to say anything, just to see whether he looked up. He didn't. His attention was organized and entire. 3 monitors, printed reports with his neat marginal notes, a cup of cold coffee he had stopped registering. I backed away from the doorway after a moment he did not notice. Later, Sophia asked me to quiz her on electron configurations, and I did it for 20 minutes. And at the end of those 20 minutes, something in me had loosened the way it does when a thing feels briefly real. I glanced at her desk and saw the blue savings account passbook Daniel had started when she was 3 months old. Inside the front cover, in his careful slanted print, for whatever she chooses. I held it longer than I meant to, and then I set it back down and told her it was a good sign to be thinking about this already. That night, my phone lit up with a message from my friend, Jade. A screenshot of a Tulum resort sale, blue water, terracotta tile, 48 hours left on the price. Her message said she was going with or without me, and that without me would be sad. I laughed, the sharp, involuntary kind, and Daniel looked up from his laptop and asked what was funny. I showed him the screen. He said it looked nice and went back to his work. I did not text Jade back. I saved the screenshot and put the phone down. At 11:42, Daniel came to bed, set his alarm for 6:15 the way he had for 11 years, and asked whether everything was okay because I had seemed quiet. I told him I was just tired. He said okay in a way that meant he believed me, and his breathing evened within 7 minutes. I lay looking at the ceiling, aware of an absence I could not locate, and what surprised me was that when he stopped asking, I felt relieved. The question had not been complicated enough for the answer. The trip moved from a thought to a plan to a transaction across the span of 3 weeks, and each step felt cleaner than the one before it, the way choices feel clean when the consequence is still theoretical. At Jade's kitchen table over wine and her colour-coded itinerary, the trip became concrete. Flights were set. The resort was booked. Pool access, a rooftop bar, a beach that would photograph the way beaches do in advertisements. Carmen, who was newer to the friend circle and had the generous energy of someone for whom a trip was simply a trip, had already settled her share by the time I arrived. The cost breakdown showed my portion was the largest because I had asked, without being pushed, for the ocean view room, and Jade had not pointed this out. I had wanted a specific thing, and I had asked for it, and that small act of asking felt like evidence of something I could not yet name. Jade brought up a birthday dinner I had attended 6 weeks earlier, where a colleague named Marcus had told a ridiculous story about a wine region, and I had laughed. Not the polite indoor kind, but the real one, sudden and unguarded, the kind I had not produced in 2 years of careful evenings. The laugh itself had startled me, not because of Marcus, but because of its own existence, the fact that my body could still do that, unprompted, without preparation. On the drive home that night, Daniel had noticed my barely touched plate and asked whether I had eaten enough. I had looked at his profile, the familiar jaw, the collar button I kept meaning to fix, and something in my chest had named itself quietly, without drama. He could see my calorie intake and not my face. Marcus had been texting me since that evening, nothing that could not be read aloud, but something I would not have sent 6 months ago. I told Jade I needed to feel that way somewhere I was allowed to feel it. She said it was the most honest thing I had said in months. Neither of us examined what allowed meant in that sentence. After Carmen left the room, Jade asked where the money was coming from. Her voice was specific and quiet in the way that means a guess has already been formed. I told her I had it covered. She asked once more, with her eyes rather than another sentence, and I told her not to worry. She refilled our glasses and changed the subject. She chose silence because she needed to go as much as I did, and I knew this, and she knew I knew, and neither of us said it. On a Tuesday morning at 9:47, with the house empty and Sophia at school and Daniel at work, I stood at the kitchen counter in my work clothes with my phone in my hand and the banking app open. The college fund balance had been accumulating for 16 years at $200 a month, a balance that was substantial in the way of things built quietly and never discussed. I navigated to the transfer screen. I told myself I had given 16 years. I told myself Daniel had financial buffers I had never been invited to understand. Retirement accounts, an investment portfolio, an emergency fund that had always just been there, managed, opaque, his. I told myself I would replace the money in 6 weeks, that the account had 2 years before it was needed, that I was not taking something that was hers, only borrowing against a future that had not happened yet. The transaction screen asked me to confirm. I pressed confirm. 4 minutes. I moved the passbook from the kitchen counter, where it had migrated from Sophia's room, to the drawer under the microwave. I closed the drawer. I picked up my coffee. I went to work. In the break room between appointments, I ran through the justification in the complete polished form it had taken over weeks of rehearsal. There was a specific thought at the center of it. I would never take something that was hers. I held this thought with care. I did not follow the thought that came directly after it. 2 days later, Daniel mentioned the bank alert in the family minivan on the way home from Sophia's spring program. He was calm and specific. He told me the notification had logged activity on the college fund account at 9:47 on Tuesday morning, that his device had been flagged as the access point, and that a transaction appeared to have been initiated and then completed, not merely viewed. He asked whether I had made a transfer because he wanted to understand the account status before they got into the college planning process in the fall. He added that he thought it was past time for the two of them to sit down and review the household accounts together, something he framed as overdue and practical. He was not accusing, he was cataloguing. I told him I had checked the balance because Sophia had mentioned the account recently and I was curious about the current figure. I said I might have clicked something by accident but hadn't completed any transaction. I said the bank probably sent alerts for any access, even read only. He was quiet for a moment and then said they should plan a time to review everything before fall. He pivoted to his estimate of Sophia's projected college costs, adjusted for 20, 28 inflation. And he spoke in figures for 4 minutes, and I watched the passing streetlights through the passenger window and felt something I could not name that was located somewhere between grief and the complete absence of surprise. He had always been exactly who he was. I had known, before I moved the money, precisely who I was married to. The knowing was not the same as the seeing. That evening, I texted Marcus. I told him I was going to Tulum the following month and that I was looking forward to being somewhere with no spreadsheets. I added a small parenthetical. Finally. He responded in under 2 minutes. I noticed the 2 minutes and chose not to examine that noticing. I placed my phone face down on the kitchen counter, in the exact spot where the passbook had been before I moved it. The morning before the flight, Sophia appeared in the bathroom doorway while I was getting ready. She was still in her pajamas. She told me she hoped I had the best time and that I deserved a real break and should not worry about anything at home. She said her father had told her the trip was covered. I looked at her face in the mirror, the specific open quality of a teenager who trusts without having been given a reason not to, and told her I would bring her back something beautiful. I meant it. I said it without understanding that I had already taken the most beautiful thing in that house and packed it into a carry-on. 7 days in Tulum looked like freedom from the outside, and from the inside it mostly looked like freedom too, at first, and then differently later. But I did not understand the difference until I was back. The first morning I woke at 7:20 with no alarm and lay still for 4 full minutes with no one needing anything and no permission slip and no school calendar. And those 4 minutes were the best I would feel on the entire trip. I held that stillness the way you hold a thought you know will leave, and then Carmen knocked to ask about breakfast, and the morning reassembled itself into the ordinary logistics of 3 women deciding where to eat. By the second afternoon, Carmen had filmed the reel. Golden hour at the pool, the 3 of us in the best versions of ourselves. Good light, good outfits, the particular looseness of people who have put their obligations down for a week. She tagged everyone before asking, which was simply how Carmen moved through the world, and Renata reposted it and added a caption she typed and edited and typed again, and finally sent. Finally. Just. Finally. The caption felt like truth. It felt like the real sentence under all the other sentences she had been saying for 2 years. Over the following days, a pattern settled into the content she posted. A story from the resort bar captioned when nobody asks where you're going. A carousel of 7 days in which Daniel's name did not appear, Sophia's name did not appear, her city did not appear. She was, in this content, no one's wife and no one's mother. She told herself she was not lying about her life, only choosing not to display it. The distinction felt important. On the 4th night, Jade and Carmen went to the rooftop bar, and Renata sat alone on the hotel room balcony. The water beyond the resort lights was dark and continuous. She was tired in a way the trip had not touched, a deeper tired, below the sun and the food and the music. She thought about her mother's hands, the permanent roughness from the hotel cleaning products, the wedding ring worn even after her father left, the soap smell that never fully came off. Her mother had worked as a hotel housekeeper for 34 years and died of a heart attack at 58 in this state, having never left it. At the bedside, her last clear sentence had been said without self-pity, in the quiet voice of a woman who had already made her accounting. I always meant to see the ocean. Renata had been running from that sentence since she was 24. She sat on the balcony and thought, she never got to see this. She thought it as a defense for everything she had done. Then, briefly, a different thought arrived in full, that her mother would never have taken something that didn't belong to her to get here. She closed this thought before it opened, with the practiced efficiency of a woman who had learned which thoughts to leave shut. She went down to the bar and stayed until 2 in the morning, and the laugh was real, and she was free, and the door had been closing behind her the whole time. Back home, Daniel was not looking at her Instagram posts in the way she imagined. periodically with growing concern. He had been sent an email by his sister Lena at 11 on a Wednesday evening, 3 days into the trip, while Sophia was asleep. Lena had been watching Renata's profile with the attention of someone waiting to decide what to do with what they know, ever since a backyard barbecue 18 months earlier where Renata had cut off Lena's story mid-sentence to take a phone call that turned out to be nothing. Lena was not petty. She had also watched, 9 years ago, while their father's savings were misused by someone he trusted, and she had stayed quiet because she did not want to be in the middle, and she had never forgiven herself for that silence. When a former co-worker commented on the reel that Renata was living her best single life, and Renata liked the comment, Lena captured the screenshot. She sat with her phone for a full evening, weighing what she knew against what she owed. Then she called Daniel, told him she was sorry and that she thought he should see something, and sent the email. She said she was sorry again before she hung up. He thanked her, and neither of them said anything else. Daniel read the email at the kitchen table at 11 p.m. He looked at the screenshots, the reel, the liked comment, and its timestamp. He looked at the fact that he had received 2 logistics texts from Renata in 7 days, both signed with a bare initial and no question about Sophia. He was not angry in the way of a man who raises his voice. He opened the financial tracking software he used for work and created a new document with a title that was just a date and nothing else. He opened the bank's account portal and pulled the college fund activity log. He read it. He made coffee because he was not going to sleep, and he knew this. His reaction was the specific, clarifying quiet of a man who has run out of benefit of the doubt and has started to build something else instead. She texted him from the resort on day 5 to say the food was incredible, and on day 7 to confirm her Sunday flight. Both messages were informational, no warmth, signed with a bare R. His responses were brief and correct. She read them and thought, he is busy, he is fine, he is steady, because his steadiness had always been the floor she stood on, and she had never considered that the floor could have a plan. At the airport, turning her phone back on at the gate on Sunday morning, the notifications filled the screen in arrival order. Instagram comments, Jade's check-in texts, a school email about a field trip payment due by Friday. At the bottom of the stack, time-stamped Saturday at 8:16 p.m., a text from Daniel. It said safe travels and that they should talk when she was settled. No warmth, no period, no question mark. She read it 3 times on the moving walkway toward baggage claim, and she told herself he was tired, and she told herself it was a work thing, and the walkway carried her forward at a steady and indifferent speed. Home looked the same and was not the same. The angle of things had shifted by a small, specific degree, not enough to name out loud, not enough to ignore in private. She unpacked alone on the Sunday she returned. The sundress from day 3 still held the smell of coconut sunscreen in its fabric, and she paused over it with something that was not guilt, but was close to grief. A clinging, the instinct to stay inside a smell for a little longer, the way a person holds a good dream past the point where it still makes sense to. Daniel appeared in the bedroom doorway briefly while she was unpacking and said, without temperature, that it looked like a good trip. She said it was what she needed. He said good and went back to his office, and she waited for more, and the more did not come, and she told herself this was just one of his silences, the kind she had always found difficult to read. On Thursday, her work phone rang during the break between appointments. Sophia's guidance counselor spoke carefully and professionally. Sophia had been distracted in class, and in a private session had asked whether it was normal for parents to stop talking to each other. Not whether they were divorcing, whether it was normal for them to stop talking. Renata sat in the break room with the phone in her hand and the specific sensation of being read something she had written without knowing she was writing it. 3 days after her return, Lena called her directly. The call was 12 minutes long, and Lena was not unkind. She said she loved Renata, she said she loved her brother, and she said she had no interest in being in the middle of anything but needed Renata to know she had called Daniel because she was worried and not because she was making a choice about sides. She said she knew it was more complicated than a photograph. Renata thanked her and said it was more complicated than Lena knew. This was true. It was also a door half closed. After the call, she sat for 8 minutes and allowed herself to consider, for the first time with any real seriousness, whether she was in actual trouble. She decided she was not. She went back to her appointments. 2 days later, she went into Daniel's home office to retrieve a phone charger from the shelf she always kept one on. He was at his desk with his back slightly toward her, and what she saw when she came through the door stopped her. He was not working, not on the phone, not reviewing anything. The screen in front of him was dark. He was holding a pen, but not writing. He did not hear her come in. She watched him for 4 seconds. A man who had spent his professional life building structures that were not supposed to fail, sitting perfectly still in the specific way of someone who has discovered a problem he cannot project his way out of. He looked more tired than any overdue report would explain. She backed out of the doorway and got a charger from the hall instead, and she told herself he was stressed about work, and she did not go back in, and she did not think about the 4 seconds until much later when it was too late for them to mean anything actionable. The partial truth came over dinner the following Friday. Sophia was at a friend's house. Renata had bought a good bottle of wine and lit the candle from the kitchen that had been unused for 6 months, and she offered him something genuine, that she knew the last several months had been tense between them, that she knew she had been pulling away, and that she was specifically sorry for that distance. She named the drift without naming its cause, and she named it with real feeling because it was real, because the distance was real. Daniel listened with his full attention, the way he did when he was processing data. When she finished, he asked quietly whether there was anything she wanted to tell him that she hadn't said yet. She looked at him across the candle. She said no. His expression did not shift. He refilled her glass and said, "Okay." She did not understand until much later that the question had not been hoping for new information. It had been closing a door he had already opened and read. The following week, on an ordinary afternoon, she came home from work and found him in the driveway loading 2 cardboard boxes into the back of his car. The boxes were clearly heavy. He was organized about it, unhurried, the efficiency of a man who knows where everything is going. She asked what he was doing. He told her without hesitation and with direct eye contact that he was taking some work binders to a colleague's office for a project he was collaborating on. She watched him close the trunk and back out of the driveway. She went inside and poured a glass of water at the sink. She told herself he was stress organizing, the way he sometimes did when work was difficult. She did not open the drawer under the microwave. That night, a text from Jade. "He knows something. I can feel it from here. Please be careful." Renata read it in the bathroom with the door locked and then opened her banking app for the first time since before the trip. The college fund balance was unchanged from the morning she had transferred the money out. She had not put a single dollar back. The first round of financial aid documentation for early college applications would be required in approximately 11 weeks. She did the math. She closed the app. She told herself she had time. The sentence landed differently now than it had 6 weeks ago, but she closed that distinction too. The text Daniel sent to her work phone on a Wednesday had the clinical register of a changed relationship. He requested a time to sit together and review some household accounts and upcoming obligations. The phrase household accounts was new. She had never heard it from him in that specific formation, as a scheduled item, as something that required a meeting. She had lived beside a man who communicated through logistics for 16 years. She knew what a scheduled financial review meant. Before the Sunday morning meeting arrived, Renata booked a boutique hotel 90 minutes outside the city. She told Daniel it was a work team building retreat organized by the dental practice. She told Jade first, and Jade pushed back, genuinely, for the first time in this whole arc. Jade said she was watching Renata walk towards something she could not walk back from and did not know how to stop her. She said it plainly, without drama, with the bluntness of a woman who had spent 18 months enabling choices because she needed them to be made. Renata told her she just needed breathing room before a conversation she knew was coming. The hotel was booked before she finished the call. The deposit of $340 came from the joint checking account, small enough to be unremarkable in a normal month. She told herself it was invisible. She was reasoning about what a man could miss who had already decided nothing was ordinary. The Sunday morning review happened in the living room. Sophia was at a friend's house. The coffee table was between them, and Daniel set a single printed page face up on its surface. He was wearing the faded blue weekend shirt, the one with the collar button that had been missing for months, and she noticed the button the way you notice a thing you have failed to fix so many times that the noticing has become the failure. He asked her to look at the page with him. He walked her through a transfer on a specific date, quoted the exact amount, told her the transaction had logged her device and appeared completed, not exploratory. He asked where the money had gone. He used the word needs, not wants, when he said he needed to understand what had happened to Sophia's college savings. He said he was not asking her to explain everything right now, but that if something was happening that required them to address it together, financially, personally, any of it, he would rather do that now than after it became something neither of them had a choice about. The offer was real. The most emotionally direct thing he had said to her since the hospital parking lot the night her mother died. She told him he was making her feel like she was on trial. She told him she was not a financial employee who owed him a report, and that he had controlled every financial decision in the marriage from the beginning and had built a system that excluded her and was now using the same system to interrogate her. She said this with full feeling because it was also true. He had never invited her into the financial architecture of their life, and that exclusion was not imaginary. He listened to all of it without interrupting. Then he asked quietly whether Sophia knew the account had less in it than she thought it did. Something specific moved through her chest, and she managed it immediately. She told him the conversation was over. The boutique hotel lobby 90 minutes from home was a nice lobby with good lighting and the same ambient music as every nice lobby. She checked in, went to a chair by the window, ordered coffee, and opened her phone. There was nothing to do. She had booked this trip to prove she still could, and she was here, and the proof sat inert in the chair beside her because there was no one to show it to. She ordered a second coffee she did not need. She opened Instagram and scrolled and put the phone away. She thought about the Tulum balcony and the dark water and her mother's hands. And then, sitting in the lobby with the second coffee growing cold, the thought arrived in its full form, and she did not close it in time. Her mother had not been talking about travelling. The sentence, "I always meant to see the ocean," had never been about a destination. Her mother had been describing the experience of owning something that was just hers, not borrowed from a marriage, not justified by a cause, not taken from someone else's future to fund the present, just hers, chosen, owned, returned from. Renata sat with this for approximately 4 seconds before she put it away, but the 4 seconds were long enough for the shape of the thing to register. She was sitting in the loneliest hotel lobby she had ever chosen, drinking coffee she did not want, with no one expecting her and nothing to return to that felt like a life she had built rather than borrowed. She had mistaken the booking for evidence of freedom. The booking was the act that closed the last door. She sat until the coffee was cold, and then she went back to the room and watched television until she could sleep. She returned Sunday evening to find Daniel in the driveway. He had heard the car. He was calm, holding nothing, and he said without preamble that he had spoken with someone that week about their finances and their situation, and that he wanted her to know that whatever happened next, his priority was making sure Sophia was protected. He used the word protected about their daughter and not about their marriage. He did not raise his voice. He did not ask another question. He went back inside, and the door closed. and she stood in the driveway with the shape of a cutting response forming in her mouth and no right shape for it. That evening, a text from Sophia at her friend's house. Warm, ordinary, unbearable. She had been looking at scholarships with her friend's mother, and someone had mentioned that financial aid required parents to document college savings, and Sophia said she had never actually checked her balance, but that her dad had set it up when she was born, and she trusted it was fine. She ended the message with a heart emoji. Renata read it standing in the living room with her coat still on, suitcase still in the car. She put the phone face down on the kitchen counter. The coat stayed on for 4 more minutes. She did not text back. 3 weeks after the driveway conversation, on a Tuesday afternoon, Sophia came home from school with a college prep packet her guidance counselor had assigned to all juniors. A financial planning worksheet asking students to verify their college savings balance and intended application type with a parent and return the completed form within 2 weeks. She dropped her backpack at the kitchen table as she always did and called to Renata that she needed help with the savings section. Renata was at the stove. She turned to say she would be right there. Daniel was already seated at the table. She had not heard him come in. He was sitting across from Sophia's chair with a printed document face down in front of him, and he was looking at Sophia with the careful, level attention of a man who has decided the next several minutes must be exactly right. Sophia opened the banking app on her phone and looked up her account balance. She read the number aloud. She said it was not right, that it was way less than her father always told her it would be. Daniel turned the printed document face up and placed it between Sophia's phone and the worksheet. It was the complete transaction history for the college savings account, 16 years of deposits and 1 withdrawal. He said quietly, "I know." Renata was still holding the spatula. She would remember the spatula later, not the look on Sophia's face or the printed numbers, because the spatula had given her hands something to hold when everything else had stopped making sense to hold. After Sophia excused herself from the table, quietly, without theatrics, with a composure that broke something in Renata that she knew she could not mend, she tried to manage the frame. She told Daniel she had been going to tell him. She said she had a plan to restore the money before it was needed. She said the trip had been a genuine crisis for her mental health, and that he had no idea what the last 2 years had looked like from inside her own head. She said the way he had chosen to surface this in front of Sophia was calculated and cruel. Daniel said Sophia had pulled out the worksheet and that he had not arranged the worksheet. He said she had made the choice when she moved the money. He said this without volume. Sophia did not re-enter the kitchen, and the silence from the hallway was its own kind of witness. He said he had a meeting with an attorney on Thursday, and that she should consider speaking with one as well. Then he picked up his phone and sent a text to someone, and the conversation was finished. The motion to freeze joint accounts was filed 4 days later. Access to the college fund was suspended pending a full accounting review. A civil claim for misappropriation of a designated minor educational fund was opened. First scheduled hearing, 14 days from filing. Renata moved to Jade's second bedroom with 2 rolling suitcases, the contents of her nightstand, and the paperback she had been on page 114 of for 3 months. Jade made up the bed with good sheets and did not say she had told her so. For the first time in 16 years, Renata stood at a checkout counter and calculated whether she could afford the specific chocolate bar she used to find at the bottom of a grocery list, already chosen and already there, at the end of the practical column, as if it had always belonged. She sat in her car outside Jade's building on a Thursday evening, engine off, street lamp not yet on. She was thinking about the passbook, for whatever she chooses.